Finish.
It's recording.
Bringing the vision into a mission. This is Global Mission of Peace with the GoldFish Report on 9/11/2015. I am Radagast, and I'm here with a deep panel today. We have Louisa, our media outreach.
Hello, everybody.
Okay. We have Sanjay, the wonder from down under.
G'day, g'day, g'day. G'day, everyone here from Cairns.
And Sherry B with your right to know.
It's a pleasure to spend the day with you, and thank you so much for joining us again.
Opera singer and our European correspondent, Steve, is here with us.
Hello from Germany to everybody. Hello.
And of course, our friend Dave Schmidt has joined us today.
Thank you very much. It's nice to join you here on your program.
And of course, it's all built around the keen intellect and the warm heart of the ambassador of the Dragon family.
Thank you very much. Always making me red in the face when you're, making all this announcement about me. Thank you very much. Anyway, I want to start the program today by, of course, welcoming all our guests from all around the world, and also especially today, Dave Smith. We had a program with Ron Van Dyke a week ago, and where we talked about that we've been spending over 1 year together, and so me and Dave has also now spent over 1 year together. And, so I thought that would be time to bring in Dave and talk a little bit, about this journey over this year of him meeting the Red Dragon and being in China and meeting family members and meeting me both in Europe and in Hong Kong. And also as well, we're gonna after that, maybe Dave could start talking about that, and after that we will go into some of the news discussions. Okay, Dave.
Well, thank you. I mean, it's a pleasure to be here. It was a year ago in August that you had contacted me because, on my regular program that I do on the Sedona Connection, it was at that time it was really focused a lot around the whole RV GCR stuff. But I was one of those lone voices where saying if there's going to be an RV or a GCR, the only place on this planet or the only people who have the money to fund that thing was the Dragon family, and I had picked that up and I had stuck with that. I just had learned about the family, through a kind of a cursory means through some reading, but it just made common sense. I knew that they were the trustees of all of this gold. They were the only place that kind of money could exist, because when you sit down and you do the math of what everybody talks about wanting to have an RV or a GCR, at some point in time, somebody's got to pay for it. The money has to come from somewhere. Well, the next thing, lo and behold, I get this contact and says, the ambassador of the Dragon family would like to start a conversation with you. And that was in August of last year. And I know we were talking maybe 2 to 3 times every week, and it kind of progressed over a period of time. I was doing my workshops. And then the next thing you know, you came in and started joining us in our workshops. And I think probably the first one was in October of last year. And you would come on for basically 1 or 2 hours for a live Q&A, and the people at the workshops could actually get a conversation with you. And that progressed over the months, and you and I continued to talk. And I know I had you as a frequent guest on my program. And the next thing I know, Charlotte and I in December ended up going to China. And it was there that we met with the Red Dragon, another of the senior elder members. We had kind of begun to be introduced to the structure of the family. That led again to another trip, back in February. I had opened up my Hong Kong bank account, at that time. And it was my last trip that we had done that in May. But yeah, I've had 3 trips there, and I've met with the family a couple times. I've had the 1 trip to Europe to meet you, had spent time with you in Hong Kong. You and I continue to talk. We talk about once every week or two, not as much as in the past, but you're far more busy than what you used to be. You've got a lot more people involved in your life. You have this program, and I'm glad, I'm thankful to see how you're beginning to branch out. But you and I continue to have our friendship. You've been an absolutely wonderful, valuable source of information. And I don't know how many, but I would assume there's a very, very high percentage of your listeners had actually come through the program that I had, or the people that had, most of the people that went to Hong Kong, almost all of them had come through my workshops. And so it was my pleasure to be able to introduce those people to you, to allow them to come and become acquainted with you, and to see how you're expanding in the message that you're delivering. So I think that's kind of a short version. I continue to receive all kinds of great information from you. The conversations are great. You're such a wonderful source of information. And obviously a lot of it I can't necessarily share on the air unless I want somebody showing up at my door that I'd rather not talk to. So, but Mr. Ambassador, it's always been such a wonderful time, and again, the friendship that we have developed, and I know that's going to continue in the future.
Very good, very good. I want to share some photos here. This is photos from China. Here you have Sherry and our dear friend Sticky Finger. And here you have the whole crew sitting there eating food together with Red Dragon. And here's another photo with the gang being out at the Temple Street eating. And here's another part of the gangs sitting around. And here is when they're making some problems at the train station. And here you have a little lady from Australia and from America ready to meet the Red Dragon. And here they're walking around in Hong Kong, enjoying themselves. And here lively and lovely, conversations. And here sharing them or trying to rob a bank. and here is basically Sherry together with the floating ladies that works in the floating place. So I just wanted to share the photos of so many who has come now to through True Vision of Peace to meet the family, to get the projects ready and for project moving. And at the same time also we have people that have been taken to the Shaolin Temple, been taken to these floating machines where they're having all this magical healing, and taken to the doctors that heals them, special Chinese doctors. So there's been a wonderful weeks of journeys, and which has made a wonderful, very strong bond between the family and the True Vision of Peace people. So that is a great thing. And that's why we're turning now this vision into a mission. And we're going to leave the true vision in the past and moving into the global mission of peace. And so the separation is in place. We have moved out to a new arena, and we're going to do that in a new way and with a new holded head of intellects that are going to be able to bring this whole thing further to where it should be. Okay, so that is very, very, very amazing. Okay. And also, we're going to have new programs coming up on the CBC Global Education page, where you will be able to find programs for how to present your project and how to do your products, and also how to present your product, because we have instructions that we can go do up to 900 programs. So we still can take in as many as possible. And I recommend for the people to come first to the funding to really start pushing to join this program now, and also take that place to go to China and having the experience with the family, which is a wonderful, lovely thing. Okay. And so that's what with that. And also I will be on Dave's workshop tomorrow to talk to the people, and I hope that Dave can help pushing forward the new sites and the new things that we're doing, so we can promote, so we get more people.
Absolutely. I've always said, I mean, it was
involved
a year ago. Yeah, Mr. Ambassador, it was a year ago in Orlando when we had that special Orlando seminar that we started the whole concept of project funding. And that's when you had one of your associates, show up and made a presentation. And that's where the whole issue of project funding started. And it was a carry on from there. That was in the Orlando seminar in October of last year. And from there, that's a lot of people. I think we had about 80 or 90 people show up for that, understanding project fundings. And most of those, that's where they got involved. It took time for it to unfold, but we're now starting to see the fruits of that. And we know those first groups are just about ready to receive their funds.
Thanks, Dave. I wanted to also mention that some of the topics that we're going to be covering today is we're going to get an update as well on the refugee situation in Germany, which in Europe actually, but I think it's primarily in Germany where there's a concentrated situation going on. It doesn't seem to be under control very well. So at this moment, we're not going to be able to give updated information on what we're going to do about this clothing drive that that we're organizing. We're not ready. It's a little early, maybe a little premature to give out any information on that until we see things settle down a little bit over there right now. And we're also going to, because this is 9/11, this is today, September 11th, so we're also going to talk a little bit about that day 14 years ago, which I witnessed myself firsthand. And share some experiences about that, and also if we learned anything from that, if there were any lessons learned, and what the impact of that really is. So I'd like to go to Steve and ask Steve if you'd like to give us an update on what you are experiencing over there with the refugee situation.
Well, what I found out is that we've contacted several organizations. We've heard back from only a few. It seems to be chaos over here because you must understand there are 10,000 refugees coming from Hungary into Austria per day, approximately, alone. So these organizations are overwhelmed at the moment. But from what I've gathered, the main problem now, okay, there are many issues to it. I don't know where to begin. I think we can start with Hungary. Viktor Orban has, the president, prime minister, whatever he is, has announced that any refugee crossing the border is a criminal and subject to a potential 3-year prison term. So basically what we're looking at is people are coming from Syria, Turkey, Greece, Macedonia, Serbia, Hungary. He's building a 175-kilometer fence and he's going to stop them. So the humanitarian crisis, I think, will be in Europe, but at the moment it looks like it's potentially in Serbia and already in Hungary. So I've contacted the UN High Commission for Refugees in Hungary. They've sent me a web page. It's in English, so we're going to post it at the bottom of the YouTube, I'm assuming. And we'll post that there where they're looking for donations. They've listed out the clothes and the items they need, medicines and things like that. So we'll give that information. But I'd just like to add that in Germany itself, I mean, Austria seems to be like a halfway house. The Austrians are being very good. It looks like the situation is good. They're shunting them along to Germany. And as the ambassador may have mentioned offline, people are being shunted further north, and often people want to go to Sweden for different reasons. But Germany, within Germany, I'm already starting to see cracks in the reports I've read in the German press and some of the interviews that have been done. Angela Merkel, her official stance is pro-acceptance of the refugees, but Bavaria, which is taking the brunt of the first waves, there are already cracks between the politicians, specifically Horst Seehofer. He's the CSU, the Christian Social Union Party, is talking against it. The Home Secretary of Bavaria is also saying it can't go on forever, and they may even have to stop the Schengen. He mentioned that. The Schengen, which means, of course, the free movement within Europe of people. So cracks are starting to show, and there's no consensus amongst the United Nations, apparently, that I can see. So the situation is developing. An enormous amount of people are coming through. We're looking at the official figures are around 800,000 that they're expecting in Germany alone, but people have said offline around 1 million more. So the situation is developing rapidly and is not getting better.
Do you know what the percentage of men versus women and children are? Is it something like 70% males who are coming across? Did you? I know the ambassador had mentioned he had noticed a report about this disparity and why so many men. And where are the women and children, really? Because there was only like 17% female and then maybe 13% children. And if that's accurate, I don't know because I'm not there. But I'm just trying to wonder, why we have such this huge disparity and what the reason could be for that.
Well, as far as I've read, I haven't seen any official figures. From the pictures I've seen, yes, I must agree with what I've seen, but of course I'm only seeing a very small slice of pictures. But I must also mention, there are not only Syrians coming through, there are Afghanis, there are people from different regions, and there are even taggers along from Serbia and other regions along the way through economic reasons. So that's what the Germans are especially, they're worried about, that they want to sort out who's really a refugee and who isn't. So the borders seem to be open. It's like a floodgate at the moment.
I see. Radagast had some interesting news today in the middle of all this. Speaking of the war, Radagast had noticed something interesting in the news today to try to heal some of the problems, some of the wounds that are in Iraq. And if Radagast would like to comment on that.
Yeah, yes, I would. Somebody had sent it to me, and it's a report, and it starts out: a car bomb explodes on a commercial Baghdad street, killing 10 people and injuring many more. Sadly, such destruction is not unusual in the Iraqi capital. But in the wake of this blast, something unusual did happen. As police and military secured the area, a man appeared wearing a black suit jacket, his long hair combed back. He unfolded a small chair and sat down, and then, amid the rubble and ash, he began to play his cello. The musician is Karim Wasfi, the renowned conductor of the Iraqi National Symphony Orchestra. Wasfi has been appearing at such sites around the city of Baghdad, playing an original composition titled Baghdad Morning Melancholy. A deadly attack on his own Baghdad neighborhood a few weeks ago prompted him to take his cello to the streets. He said, "The other side chose to turn every element, every aspect of life in Iraq into a war zone. I chose to turn every corner of Iraq into a spot for civility, beauty, and compassion." Karim Wasfi's playing at the sites of such devastation attracts a wide-ranging and appreciative audience of soldiers, shop owners, and residents of the destroyed neighborhoods. Many listen in tears. Wasfi's music inspires hope and perseverance and assures his fellow Iraqis that life, not death, is reality. He said, "Unlike what people think, we have a choice of fighting back," the maestro explains. "We can't just surrender to the impending doom of uncertainty by not functioning. But I think it's an awakening for everybody to make a choice and choose how they want to live, not how they want to die. My message as an artist, as a conductor, also as a cellist, that when things are abnormal, we make things normal. We make things worth living for." And I just found that so uplifting, because as a musician myself, and knowing the power of music to uplift the soul, to see somebody be proactive and bring the magic of art, in this case music, into the devastation, to refocus people away from the devastation onto what is unique about humanity and what is beautiful about humanity, what is inspired by the Creator. I just found it very touching. And in the midst of all our reporting of things that are going ill in the world, that there are people who are making things better, and in unusual ways. Like most people think, okay, we'll send clothes, we'll send money, we'll send food, we'll send medicine. But here's somebody showing up and giving music, giving art, and how in the modern world, how much art, true art, has like become almost underground. We get the commercial music, we get the corporatized music stuff, kind of like, we eat food stuff, we smoke tobacco stuff. Everything is adulterated. But here's a man with his cello and the magic of music, transforming people's life in the middle of devastation, death, injury, gloom and doom. And all it takes is just that music, and people shift. And so in the shift and change, we should not forget the arts. The arts are a powerful part of shifting and changing. And I thought it would be nice to just bring that to the forefront.
Oh, that's very nice. Thank you, Radagast. I think Sherry has a comment she'd like to make on what you're talking about.
Yes, on the topic today, and of course this day of September 11th, just taking an overview, there are all these situations happening on our planet that we could call false flags. Yes, they are happening, but by false flags, meaning that they are orchestrated by the powers that be, And really the powers that be are the banksters, the bankers who run the world. Now what's happening in Syria, which we're talking about the refugees now, this has been a plan that dates back from at least the 1980s called the Oded Inan's plan that I believe Israel had created. And it's to destabilize the area, which includes Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Iraq, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia. And so this is right in with their plans of destabilizing this area. So, I so appreciate what Radagast just shared with us, because we can't fall victim and feed into this monster that they're presenting to us in whatever shade and color and wardrobe today. We have to, amongst ourselves, we, the human beings here, humanity, keep peace, keep cool, just keep supporting each other, keep loving each other, and absolutely the arts, that's the soul. I think Steve, who's an opera singer, and Louisa, who's a piano player, and Radagast, who's a guitar player, and the ambassador who has a beautiful voice, and I know Sanjay has talents too, and Dave. But in any event, it's, we have to bring that music and that poetry and whatever art and love into our everyday. I'm going to jump real quick and just make one comment on part of this is us waking up, and we're here on the GoldFish Report. We are thinking outside of the bowl, and no pun intended there, and trying to share these thoughts with everyone to help awaken everyone. 9/11, there has been this report that's come out in the Grand Awakening, and it's by the architects. It's out of Berkeley University. I don't know if any of you have heard about it. It's called Beyond Misinformation: What Science Says About the Destruction of World Trade Center Buildings 1, 2, and 7. Now, this is about a 50-page report, and I won't go into it now, but I'll just share with you the website if you want to check it out. It is really, really like, wow. We're hearing from the top architects how this could not have happened the way we're told in the mainstream. The website is ae911truth.org, just in case you want to check out that report. And I'm going to go ahead and throw this to Dave Schmidt before he has to run off with all his activities and see what he has to add to this topic.
Well, thank you, Sherry. I think, the ambassador's one of his main primary goals, and he had always shared this with me, even going back a year that I've known him. He says his passion is this war on ignorance. And part of that is us waking up. And, in spite of the tragedy of 9/11, and yes, it was a tragedy, and yes, there were real lives that were lost there. On the other hand, to me, it has become a catalyst to help us wake up. Is because we all remember where we were on that day, the shock that came in. I can remember how it affected me. I was still in the military reserves. I was ready to put my military uniform on and go kill those bastards. That was how I felt that day. It had grabbed me so much. And it took me a number of years to come to the point of going through my own cognitive dissonance of realizing the truth. And that's a process and a period of time that it takes for people, and we're starting to see it now. The people are starting to wake up. And one of the classic things is what we saw today that we didn't expect. C-SPAN today, throughout the day, is running the report on those professional architectural and engineers. They have a movie that they have put out, a video that basically says from a pure science and physics standpoint, it was absolutely impossible for those towers to collapse in the way that it's explained to us in the media and in the official 9/11 report. It's not now just no longer in the alternate media. It's coming into the mainstream media as well, and they're starting to tell the story. And it shows how we are starting to wake up. And we have a tendency sometimes to want everybody to wake up all at once. But cognitive dissonance is a process that takes time for the masses. And it's happening because you're talking about it. It's happening because I'm talking about it, and others are talking about it. Our world is changing. And we're seeing the results of it. And today is one of those days that even though we don't like to think about what happened on that day, you can take it and turn it and shift it around and turn it into something that's very positive, and how it has the ability to truly wake us up. And as a culture, that's what we need to do, and it's happening. Sanjay, I guess it's on to you now, buddy.
Yes, I'd like to continue on to what we're talking about with these refugees and all the other things happening in Europe. But at the same time, you know, there was a few Australian lives lost at 9/11 also. I'd like to acknowledge their loss and pray for those families. But in keeping with the thing, you know, the Afghani president came out today and said that he doesn't believe that Al-Qaeda existed or did the attacks planned from Afghanistan. And this brings me to one of the quotes that it says, "Truth will set you free, but first it'll piss you off." So a lot of people will not like the truth that's going to come out, and it started to come out. And like, I mean, those that are open with their eyes and ears can see what's happening. But it will piss a lot of people off. And maybe, you know, when you're feeling uncomfortable, it's probably the first time you are actually comfortable. So let's accept the changes that's going to come through, and let's embrace the truth. Let's, you know, wake up. And I mean, this is what's, you know, annoys me sometimes, that our governments and media play jokes with the real truth. I mean, with this fence and all these other stupid things, it's been going on for a couple of weeks. We're trying to create this zoo of exotic animals, which is us. So we need to sometimes stop and think a little bit deeper than what's actually happening. You know? Are we in a big zoo?
Yeah, we're in a zoo and in a fishbowl. Apparently I was too, because I was muted and I was talking and all of my mouth was moving, and this is unscripted and uncut. So sorry if I didn't include somebody there. So I just have my mouth moving and nothing's coming out. Where were you, Sanj, on September 11th? Do you remember where you were?
Yes, I actually, funny enough, a cousin of mine and myself were actually on the phone at midnight, just past midnight, talking. And I had the TV on, and he had the TV on, and he's going, "Bro, World War III just started." And I'm going, nah. I mean, next minute, the second plane goes. While we're talking, the second plane goes in the second tower. And as Dave said with this engineer's report, and I've looked at the engineer's report, and I know a lot of people say this conspiracy theory, but guys, God gave us eyes. Look at that video that the engineers have prepared. You can see a floor below each level. You see the puff of smoke come out sideways, which is controlled demolition, right? Again, truth will set us free, but it will piss us off. You can't have steel and concrete disappear like the way it did into dust, right? This was, remember Americans, this building was built and everyone was told that, you know, it's like Titanic, it'll never sink. You know, it's such a strong structure, has a spine in the middle. What happened to all that? How can it disappear? No one ever questions these things, right? This is where the GoldFish, the ignorance thing comes in, right? This is where we are setting everyone free, and not from anything else, but from ourselves. So we all need to stop and look at the facts and stuff that's going to come out. And I'd like to pass it back to Louisa and maybe the ambassador for any comments.
Thanks, Sanj. I think Dave, we know Dave's time is a little bit limited today, so if anybody else had some questions, and I think Steve had a question for Dave, because I know he has to wrap it up and he has to get going, and we're going to continue our report talking about 9/11 and a few other things. So, Steve, did you have something to follow up with Dave?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Dave if he would encapsulate what he knows at the moment, what's current, with his, from what he experiences right now.
What's current? Give me a little bit more. What's current on?
Well, a general question. What's the feeling you have with people? Is there a change? Is there a shift? What's going on?
Oh, absolutely. And here's.
This is
We are
live.
live.
We are live. I think.
Dave, you're frozen, Dave.
No, I think we lost Dave. Actually, he's going to have to call back in. I think. I'm not
Didn't like the
sure.
question.
Maybe he'll unfreeze.
Right. What happened was.
Oh, here he is. We
we
lost
heard-
you, Dave.
We
Dave,
lost.
we lost
okay,
you.
right.
You're just back. You're just back.
All right, I'm now back. We are literally going through a shift and change in the world. Our Earth is moving into a new place in the galaxy where we are getting what is called the photon band. And this happens about once every, I think 13,000 years, something like it's in a cycle. We literally are having this high band of light photon energy light. Now, these are light particles that are smaller than atoms. And if you go in, if you read in the first chapter of David Wilcock's newest book, Synchronicity Key, he describes in there the experiments that have been going on in laboratories all around the world, how photon light energy literally changes DNA, and it changes it very rapidly. Well, what's happening now is the whole Earth and all of the human race is starting to receive this photon light energy.
How do you
and
see
we
the
are
change?
right in the middle. Yeah, well, see, the change is not so much on the outside, the change is on the inside. And what it's doing, this photon light energy is beginning to create a softness, a softening of the human race. Now, this is not an event that changes overnight. This is something that will take years, because when we move into this photon band, we're there for almost 2,000 years. But I'm seeing it, I'm experiencing it. I've been called an energy empath. I'm really in touch with the energy of around me and the people around me. And it's also why I live in Sedona, Arizona, because Sedona, Arizona has some of the highest vortex energy in the whole world. I can be in Sedona and I come here to Atlanta, and when I go back home, I notice the difference the next morning all the time. And this photon energy, it's more an intuitive type of a thing than it is an outward experiential type of situation. But it begins to open up your consciousness. And that's what's beginning to happen. And that's why I have such a happy hope for this whole world to shift and change. In the midst of it, those people who are receptive to it and receiving this higher vibration, their lives begin to change. But those who are in resistance to it, life begins to be what I call very disjunct for them. They become irritable, edgy, unstable, kind of not knowing what's going on. And that's why we're beginning to see more and more chaos. That's why we're seeing so many more killings and gun reports in the United States. That's why we're seeing events like Syria. It's like, yes, they've always gone on, but now they're picking up. We're seeing more and more and more of those. Well, that light energy does it. If you could use an old biblical term, it's really starting to separate the sheep and the goats. And handle it, because they can't handle it because their bodies and their lives are out of sync with the energy change that's happening in our environment. And what it means is we all have a responsibility to raise our own vibrational energies of our own beings, because we're all energy beings. Everything in the universe is energy. And that's the shift and the change that's taking place. You don't see it externally, but you feel it internally. And the real shift will take years and maybe a few decades. But in a couple decades from now, we're going to be able to look back and say, that's when the shift happened. That's when the world began to change. And we are going through a period of birthing, almost a period of labor. And labor right now is very intensive. World affairs are very intensive. They're very laborious. And we're going to make it through this.
So if I understand you correctly, it's like there's a split going on in actual fact. People who are going with the wave and people who are resisting it. And it's causing a sort of disjunction, causing a resistance or a conflict within themselves. Is that right?
Yes, it is. And that's exactly what it's doing. It's creating a separation. And to people who can handle it and who cannot handle it. And as I said, when history unfolds, we don't really understand it when we're right in the middle of it. But this is a historical event that will go on for 30 to 50 years. And 100 to 200 years from now, they're going to look back and say, that's when the shift and change happened. It started in 2012. It began to amplify in 2015. And it probably is going to go on for about another 3 years. And they'll see that that was the turning point. We don't see it when we're in the middle of it. But when you can historically look back, you realize, yes, it happened. And that's why I'm so helpful. I'm so hopeful for this world, because it's happening. I'm experiencing it personally.
Thanks, Dave. And I think we know your time. We want to respect your time.
Yeah.
We know you have a schedule to keep. And I'm going to ask the ambassador if he wants to just close up with finish up any comments that he has with you before you have to go.
Yes, as I was speaking earlier, things like that, I think that when it comes to the 9/11 situation, is that it's very sad that all these people had to incident created, many millions of 9/11s around the world. And due to that, we have a refugee crisis today and all of these other problems that we have. Today,
we're having a little technical problem with the ambassador's audio there. I mean, so we'll get him back also. I'm not sure what's happening today. We're kind of having lots of video problems. Is the ambassador back with us? Hello?
Could be the topic.
Could be the topic. I've said this before. Certain topics just really, we don't have some luck with certain topics, I think. Oh, there you are. Okay. Speak up a little. Yeah. Is he back?
You guys are getting to experience what I have periodically on my radio programs. There's people out there that don't like what I have to say. It was amazing how many times when I had the ambassador on the radio program, we would have technical problems.
Yeah. Let's see if he's back. Are you back there, Ambassador?
Yes, I should be.
Okay, we hear you.
Do you see me?
Your crest.
There
the crest. Yeah, the crest is
okay.
Okay.
No, yes, like I said, there has been a lot of murders, accidents, violent riots, accidents happening with floods in Japan, tearing down buildings and polluting out Fukushima even more. So a lot of things happening. So we have to pray for all these people and do what we can to support each other globally in all this trauma that's coming in place right now. And I think that what we need to do is to keep the focus on turning on the internal peace of everyone. And use this internal peace and spread it to others. And basically turning this true vision that we had for peace into a mission. And now basically the vision is gone into a mission. So now this is which is our plan, is to fulfill the mission and the work that we were set here to do. Yeah. And I want to thank you, Dave, to come on today. I know you're busy, and I hope you will have a good workshop this weekend. And
I will. Thank you very much, and I'm always again looking forward to when you're on with this tomorrow. So.
Yeah. And also I will have we're going to have some announcement for some new pages that's coming up connected to the vision of peace, and a lot of shift and changes, because now the mission really starts. So that is a little thing. So during the weekend it would be another GoldFish additional update coming, probably on Saturday or Sunday. Let's see. So please take care of yourself, everyone, and thank you for coming here.
Thanks a lot.
God bless you all, and God bless you all.
Love all of you. Okay, bye-bye.
Thanks, Dave.
Yep.
Bye, Dave.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Dave. Bye.
I think I wanted to just, before we close, I wanted to I think what everybody does, like after when JFK was shot, everyone kind of stops and reminisces a little bit about where they were, what they were doing, and what they experienced. And I wanted to ask the ambassador, where were you? Do you remember where you were when the 9/11 attacks happened? And what was your experience like?
Yeah, I was actually on the ground praying to Allah on my mat.
Gee.
Yes, and
Wow.
when I just finished my prayers, I put on the TV. Then I saw the second building hitting the tower. That was my experience. And then I had the prophetic dream the day afterwards, where I saw this devil type of demon and a good angel came and showed me the world and said now it's a war between good and evil. And then I saw how the whole Middle East was turning into a red color. And that actually happened the same way as the dream did. All these nations that was on the map was later on affected by the Arab Spring and all these other things. So that was quite prophetic dream that I had. And I myself personally didn't think that Osama bin Laden was capable of doing it. I was very suspicious to who actually did it. And I believe that it's the Americans together with their own Mossad agents doing it, allowing the Mossad to do the actual work, and them to allow it to happen. You understand? And that's the way that I look at it.
Well, that's quite different from the official story published in the 9/11 hearing. The 9/11 Commission's report is quite different from that. But even I think Governor Kane, who was a member of the 9/11 Commission, did have some problems with really going along with, had some problems like you're saying that Dave had brought up, that the engineers and architects just knew this wasn't possible. And it's really only a matter of time before there's enough engineers and architects who are able to speak up and speak out and kind of explain in a forensic manner why it was not possible. And quite frankly, I spoke with John Lear, who is the son of the maker of the Learjet, who's also a pilot, and he just said that it's not physically possible for a jet that size to fly 500 miles an hour that close to the ocean, just simply because of aerodynamics, that it wasn't possible to maintain. So I think what they also showed, and I've done so much research on this, they actually showed how this video fakery, there was some video fakery involved, at least from the research I have found. And because the only people who had pictures of this were people in the media. So since the media is controlled by a certain group of people, it's not a coincidence that the only pictures really came from the media or someone who may have been planted close by, because it doesn't seem very logical. And then, of course, now we're seeing
the main important question, okay, is what was inside the building 7. And where did the money disappear? Why people start talking about the missing trillions? Okay, and these things is what people should start investigating more. These offices which were going down and what was happening at this period of time in the financial world in the 7th had changed humanity's history at that time. So they destroyed that and that part of the Pentagon which was working on it. And at the same time, no one ever asked where this money went. And the only thing that happened after that, millions of people died. And suddenly, so-called allies and agents became head enemies. And all of these things is lies. And we can see that Osama bin Laden was in the clinic the time when this thing happened. And, with the CIA in Qatar, no one did anything to arrest him. We're living in a world with a lot of deception. And the Cabal have a PhD in deception. So basically, we can just realize that what can we do from now? The 9/11 happened. Unfortunately, many people died. And all the people after that died in many, many 9/11s. How can we make sure it never happens again? And how can we stop that catapult that created that thing that we have today? The refugee crisis we have in Europe now is because of 9/11. And I don't want to say that George Bush is prophetic, because I think he's pathetic, not prophetic. And basically, he said that there's going to be a long war and so on. And he's been prophetic in that manner because that's what they wanted, a long war. Okay?
Well, it's quite interesting that you were praying at the time that this happened. I have to admit that that's quite an irony there, because it's not. They seem to be polar opposite things here. You're praying and trying to be with Creator, and then this evil's happening. So it really is the good and evil, and I think that kind of highlights that. But I'd like to ask everybody here what they remember and where they were. Sherry, would you like to share with us what your memory is in 9/11?
Sure. Of course, it was 5 a.m. Pacific time. I was on the West Coast at the time. I did live just before that in Manhattan for many years, and have a lot of family history there. So, but anyways, it was about 5 a.m. in the morning, and I was working with an international best-selling author and who published books all about the Middle East. in particular Saudi Arabia. And she called me up from the East Coast and said, Sherry, wake up. You've got to turn your TV on. Turn your TV on right now. We've been attacked. And I'm like, what? And I think she said, now that I think about it, I've got to call her. I think she said something about it being an inside job. And of course, at the time, I'm like, what the heck is she talking about? And so later on, a couple of days later, she wasn't sort of talking in that direction. But I just remember turning the TV on and then having to walk my son down the street to school, and just being out here, being in Los Angeles at the time, walking down the street, it was like surreal. I mean, it was like this quiet calm, but it was really kind of strange, just to think what happened on the other side of this country. What's going on right now? This is, wow, insane. And, at first I didn't really tune into myself, like how this could have been an inside job. What's that? False flag. And I have to, and then after hearing just on the news, one of these top professors at a University of Utah, top engineering professors, saying this is an impossibility for a steel structure as this to collapse amongst itself. And just certain things I would hear here and there. And of course, I was working at a radio station, Pacifica Radio, which if, no one else in the country was talking about this being an inside job, Pacifica certainly was. And, but I just have to point out that a lot of times we hear things that seem to be like, that's crazy, conspiracy theory, conspiracy realists. That's what we are. Whenever we think that, we have to go, wait a second, why is my knee-jerk reaction to go, no way, that's crazy, don't talk about that? That's because we've been programmed that way. So anyone listening who doesn't question that this could possibly be a false flag or an inside job, which, I mean, the tides have turned. Everyone's talking about it now in that way. We have to ask ourselves, why do I feel like I have to shut up? Why is my knee-jerk reaction to not say anything? And just realize that that's how we've been programmed. So please be open-minded,
Thanks for your experience, Sherry. Thanks for sharing that with us. Steve, do you recall where you were?
Oh, yes, I do. I had been living out of Australia for like 11 years, and in 2001. And I had sung a performance at the Sydney Opera House that evening, a very unusual piece by Benjamin Britten called Les Illuminations. And the most significant text for me in that whole piece is J'ai la clé pour cette parade sauvage. I have the key to this savage parade. And after the performance, we went to a bar, had a couple of drinks, and I noticed that on all these huge TV screens on the walls in this bar, and I saw these images. I was thinking that's got to be CGI, or it can't be real. And then after the second plane hit, then we realized something's going on, because it looked like a fire. We didn't know what had happened because there was no sound. It was just these images on the wall. It was just completely abstract, as was the poem before. So I don't know what it means. I have the key to the savage parade. I have no idea, but it stuck with me.
That's so prophetic. I mean, that you were performing that, and then you kind of leave that and then go to the news. That's interesting. Radagast, do you remember where you were?
Well, I guess when it first happened, I was sleeping, and a friend of my wife's called her and said, you have to get up and turn on the TV. So we did. And at that time, both buildings were still standing, and building 2 had not been hit yet. So I was, watching live reality TV when building 2 got hit. And then, shortly thereafter was the big show. And, I was just kind of peripherally aware, having ridden, being there, of like how the core of those buildings, it's not just steel, it's steel in concrete. The core of those buildings is steel embedded in concrete. So concrete has a funny habit of not collapsing in on itself because it has mass, kind of hard for it to collapse. But that was, during the actual happening, that wasn't the first thing that came to me. But even in the next day, I remember seeing people standing in where the plane supposedly entered, there were people standing at the ledge looking over. So if a plane had entered there, I don't see how they could have been looking out, because there should have been a room filled with diesel burning. So that, right away it said, gee, it's almost like they were blown out. And then following the next day, you had that BBC reporter mentioning reading that Building 7 had also fallen. And meanwhile, there's an arrow pointing to Building 7 in the background behind her. And it was 20 minutes later after she reported that the building fell. So that's a lot of smelly stuff. But even then, it took a while for it to seep in that something was not, let's just say the official story is very official instead of official. And sometimes, I've had people say, who do you who did it? I said, I don't know who did it, but I think I know who let it happen.
Thanks for that, Radagast. What about you, Sanjay?
Well, with
oh, I think you already told us. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I did, but that's the same thing. But with everyone keep going back to this, like we're talking about conspiracy theory, right? But it's not conspiracy theory when you look at the facts, right? The fact is a fact is a fact. 2 planes went in 2 buildings. Okay, if we say 2 planes made 2 buildings collapse, where was the 3rd plane in Building 7? No one saw that. So ask the question, what happened to Building 7?
You're not supposed to notice Building 7, Sanj. That's the point.
It's not conspiracy theory, it's conspiracy therapy.
Therapy. That's good, Steve. I like that one.
And also
Wait. Yes.
Also, one thing we should not forget, okay? Actually, the whole 9/11 incident is a conspiracy. Because everything that is, it's no evidence, it's no facts, it's only conspiracy. So when they're saying that,
here we go.
So when people are questioning what happened on 9/11, they say, "Oh, you're conspiracy theorists." No, you guys are the conspiracy theorists, because everything that you're basing your information on is based on a conspiracy. So and so whose conspiracy is the real conspiracy? Because in reality, it's no facts, there's no evidence, it's only a conspiracy. Okay? So this is the problem. It is no one have ever presented a fact from their side on the official story that it is real.
We're having a little trouble with your audio, Mr. Ambassador. A little trouble with your audio. Yeah.
Yeah. But like I said, this is the problem. But like I said, this crisis that we have today is based on what happened on the 9/11, and I really hope that we're gonna put a stop for this years and years of tyranny and terror. And I pray for the souls of all the people died, of all these 9/11s all around the world. And I hope that the guilty people behind it will be taken to justice one day. Okay? That's my hope.
Thank you. I'd like to give my personal perspective on what happened that day, because at the time I was living across from Lower Manhattan. And so this was extremely personal for me, and in many ways. I used to work across the street from the Trade Center, and I used to commute through the PATH station, which runs underneath the Trade Center. And I have to tell you that really those buildings took on their own persona in Lower Manhattan, in all of Manhattan. And they were really not necessarily the most beautiful looking buildings, but they did represent something to the world, and they represented something to people who live in the New York area. And just the escalators alone, when I would come out of the PATH station, were probably 10 stories tall. I mean, these were the most massive escalators you've ever seen in your life. They were so massive you would be in awe just riding them, going up to the street level, so that you could go and exit the building. And they were kind of, they were majestic in a sense when you're at the bottom of them. And I've also been inside them at the top at Windows of the World, at fundraisers and for dinner, and in other office buildings there for people that I knew. I could never imagine having to be, facing the decision to have to jump out of any of those windows, yet some people did. And horrified all of us, just the unimaginable reality that somebody would be facing. How horrible, how immensely horrible it must have been to make that choice to jump out of those windows. So we really do have to remember the people who died and perished in there. And it was an absolute tragedy, just so tragic. And we can't just go blaming a couple of people. Nobody pulls something like this off without, you know, many other people knowing. And so I was watching this happen, and I couldn't believe that I saw these towers fall. I couldn't even imagine that an airplane could cause something like that, because we've seen an airplane crash into the Empire State Building and nothing happened. I mean, there was just damage to the wall and whatever office it crashed into. And now that wasn't an airliner, but these buildings, all skyscrapers, are made to withstand. And I know an architect who used to work for the Port Authority, and their offices are in the Trade Center, and he worked on the 77th floor. And these buildings are made, and were supposed to be made, to withstand the impact of an airliner because they're tall. So there are a lot of questions, and if anybody finds himself asking questions, you're probably listening to your intuition and your higher self telling you something isn't making sense with the story. So as I was watching this happen, the towers evaporated. They basically became dust and debris, and it was a beautiful blue sunny day, and the cloud just went right over my head and blocked the sun like it was an overcast day. The cloud was so thick, and so many particles and particulates, and who knows what was in it, right? And I videotaped this, and I'll never forget, because it was, you know, just unbelievable. We were all in shock as it was happening, and then of course as things were unfolding, the Pentagon, and then, you know, the announcement of Shanksville, Pennsylvania, and it really does. You know, people do need to stop and ask questions. Some of the research that I had uncovered. By the way, I mean, I was traumatized by it, which is what they intended to do. I did have post-traumatic stress because I witnessed it, and I used to have dreams of being on airliners that were hijacked. I had dreams that I was, because the flight paths of all the airplanes would go over my home at the time, and so I would see airplanes all the time. And so for me, you know, it was a post-traumatic stress response. I had dreams that I was there under the buildings as they were collapsing, because I've been there many times. And so it really did have an effect on us. And of course, they justified the Patriot Act as a result of that, and took our freedoms away, and started to really kind of close in on us with this police state that we seem to be having in the United States. But I also wanted to kind of mention that if people did want to kind of look into this and do research, there's a lot that they can find on the internet. And doing my research, I did come across a Russian nuclear scientist who discusses the fact that between countries, nuclear power countries, there is an agreement that they are to notify, there's a treaty, in fact, where they're to notify one another of using nukes for peaceful purposes. And so this particular Russian scientist, who had been in prison in Thailand for many, many years because they didn't want him talking, but he has come out and is trying to get this information out there. And in a future report, I may mention his name. But what he indicated was that skyscrapers have to be built with a demolition plan. And the demolition plan for the World Trade Center were that they had planted mini nukes in the sub-basement. Now, if you know, if you have looked at any of the photos of the sub-basement area, it's completely melted, just completely melted. I mean, as if the molecular structure was completely changed. And people who reported being down at the pile, they called it, right after the attack happened, saw this pouring, and I saw video of this, just molten, metal, steel being poured. And the thing about that is that, gasoline engine or jet fuel doesn't melt steel. So how did the metal become so hot that it became molten and it was being poured? And there's video of this. So really, for people who want to think there's a conspiracy theory, I think you need to wake up and realize this is the world that we live in. There is evidence out there for you to find if you look for it. After this happened, I visited Lower Manhattan, and I couldn't believe the horror I saw of, my beautiful buildings that I called home, and saw just, the exoskeleton, just fragments of the exoskeleton laying amongst the debris. The buildings were all covered in soot. People were writing on there. And the smell in Lower Manhattan was so horrendous. All the cables underneath the buildings had melted, and who knows what the smell was. Then we had Christy Whitman in there from the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, saying, oh, the air is fine. And we have about 40,000 traders and financial brokers who worked in the Wall Street area who now have this cluster of cancer. There's a cancer cluster that has evolved. Many workers, the firefighters, these poor firefighters, really, who, not just the ones who died in the buildings, but the ones who were down on the pile working, who had no idea what they were breathing and went and did it anyway. And these people, many of them have, there's some who have died from air and respiratory illnesses, lung cancer, all kinds of cancers, strange cancers. These people should never have been there had they really known, if it's in fact true that there were many nukes in the sub-basement, then this was planned 30 years ago. So I just want people to stop and ask themselves and think that, we really can't let another day go by without getting the truth, because the 9/11 Commission report, is in my opinion a joke. I have it, I read it, and I think it's a joke. I think it's sad that many people just buy it and they don't stop and ask questions of what doesn't make sense. And if you look into it, you're going to start realizing that the pieces of the puzzle aren't coming together, and it's not painting a picture that you want to see. There's much more evidence out there. I'm not going to go into all of it. There are some sound analysis that are from a video taken by a professional videographer who lived over there and happened to be filming at the time. And it did reveal, the sound wave analysis did reveal that there were explosions in Building 7 in a very systematic manner. And the sound analysis does show those pressure waves because they can be measured. It's when you have those pressure waves across the water, because they were on the New Jersey side, it amplifies those pressure waves. So every 4th of July, I would always hear the pressure waves of the fireworks, after the fireworks would go off, because it had to have time to travel across the water. And when it does, it kind of amplifies, and it really hits whatever is on the other side of that water. It amplifies that sound wave. So there are a lot of scientific and forensic analysis that people are doing. I'm sure many people have been threatened, and at some point they did try to clear that area over in Jersey City and over in Hoboken, New Jersey, where people had been situated with cameras videotaping it, because of course it would reveal these sound wave analyses of all those timed explosions. So folks, it is the world we live in. We should and we need to hold people accountable who have committed these crimes against humanity. It is a somber day to remember what happened. It is for me, because that was, it's my home. And so for me, and everybody who lives in the New York area, it's their home too. And we all feel it very personally here. So I just wanted to kind of give that very personal. I know it's a little bit longer than I usually speak, but it is a very important topic. And I wanted to give that very personal story about someone who lived here and lived through it and witnessed it. And there's many other aspects that I could share, but I don't want to go into all of that now. But I'm sure that you can all sit back and remember where you were and how you found out what had happened and what you thought about it. And we really do need to start asking more questions, and we need to hold people accountable. We need to stop this war. We can't have these false flag events. And I say false flag, it doesn't mean it didn't happen. it means that it was an event that happened to distract from another agenda or to justify another agenda, something far worse than what maybe the initial event is. And as the ambassador said, we haven't stopped engaging in war ever since. So with that, if anyone has any last comments, I'd like to see if you do have any comments, anyone, before we close our show today. Steve?
Yes. I'd just like to finish off for myself in saying that we're going to post the organizations in Hungary that are going to help. But I believe that now, because of this wall, there's going to be a huge bottleneck. Serbia is going to be the big problem. The Germans are throwing billions. The Austrians are throwing 420 million at the refugees. That's going to be fine. But I think the real problem is down in the Balkans. So we'll keep you posted.
Thanks, Steve. That's good to know. Does anyone else have any other comments?
I would just share a website or to check out on YouTube, Dr. Judith Wood's Dustification. When you go to YouTube, type in Dr. Judith Wood's Dustification, and you'll see some amazing scientific evidence of 9/11 if you have not yet seen that. So I would just say thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you. And also I will invite for next GoldFish Report someone from the government in Serbia to speak to us, okay? And interview him, okay?
In Serbia. We're having a little trouble with your audio, Mr. Ambassador. I can't hear very well.
I'm sorry for that for today, but
Okay.
next time we're going to talk with the Serbians about the situation over there.
Yes.
All right,
Thank
very
you.
good. Okay, well, that concludes this this edition of the GoldFish Report, and we want to thank you all for joining us, and also please thank you to all the subscribers and all of our guests who come and are part of this report, and we are always happy to hear from you. We have a comment section below our video on YouTube, and we're always happy to hear from you. And we also like to, as the ambassador said, the ambassador wanted to invite any individuals or representatives from the Serbian government to come on and just discuss with us what's happening over there. And also, we will also provide an update in terms of the humanitarian aid effort that Global Mission of Peace is engaged in, as Steve was explaining. We will be including websites, and hopefully we really hope everyone stays safe in that area. We just want to have a call for peace. We know that tensions are very high, and there's a lot of people who are very angry. And we're not going to solve anything with anger. That never solves anything. So we need to try to just, if we really want to keep the peace over there, start with yourself and try to encourage people to be peaceful about settling into whatever situation that the governments are providing. And with that, I want to say thank you for joining us, and that's it for this edition of the GoldFish Report.